The rain had always been her lullaby, a soft, relentless rhythm against cracked windows and leaky ceilings. To most, it was just weather. To Lila Carter, it was the sound of survival, a reminder that even the sky wept for her. The orphanage on the edge of the city was supposed to be a refuge, but for Lila, it had been a prison of shadows and whispers. The caretakers smiled for the inspectors, but when the doors closed and the lights dimmed, kindness evaporated. Lila had learned to make herself invisible, to move quietly, breathe softly, and pray no one noticed her. She was 6 when she realized the world could be cruel, 12 when she stopped hoping for a family. By 18, she had learned that dreams were dangerous. They made the nights longer, the bruises harder to forget. The matron's voice still haunted her sometimes, sharp, cold, and dripping with contempt. "You're nothing, Lila. No one will ever want a broken girl like you." Maybe she was right. When she finally left the orphanage at 19, it wasn't freedom that met her at the gates. It was emptiness. The world outside was loud, vast, and indifferent. She had no degree, no savings, and no one waiting for her. All she carried was a worn-out backpack and the will to disappear. Lila found work where she could, cleaned diners, stocking shelves, scrubbing hotel floors until her fingers bled. The city was unkind, but at least it didn't lie. Here, she could survive by the hour, by the shift, by the breath. Still, there were nights when the past clawed at her. She'd wake in her small rented room, the walls thin, the lights flickering, and she'd see the orphanage again, hear the shouting, feel the weight of hands that had taken too much from her. She'd curl up, shaking, whispering the same promise to herself. "It's over, Lila. It's over." But healing wasn't that simple. Then came the night that would quietly alter the course of everything. It was late, close to midnight, and Lila had just finished her shift at the cafe downtown. She'd stayed longer to help clean after the manager left, earning a few extra dollars that might buy groceries for the week. Her shoes were soaked from the rain, her jacket thin, and exhaustion clung to her like a second skin. The streets were slick and mostly empty, glistening under the pale glow of streetlights. As she crossed the avenue, her mind drifted to the bills she couldn't pay, the silence in her room, the ache of a life that never seemed to move forward. That's when the screech of tires shattered the night. A black car, sleek, expensive, completely out of place on that side of town, swerved sharply, stopping inches from where she stood. Her heart pounded as headlights blinded her for a moment. She stumbled backward, breathless. The driver's door opened, and a man stepped out, tall, dressed in a dark suit that was probably worth more than everything she owned. His hair was slightly damp, his expression tense. He looked around, then at her. "Are you all right?" His voice was deep, calm, the kind of voice that didn't belong in her world. Lila nodded quickly, still trembling. I'm fine. I wasn't paying attention." He frowned, scanning her from head to toe, not in judgment, but concern. "You could have been hurt." "It's okay," she murmured, her instinct to shrink away. "Really." But his gaze lingered, not invasive, just searching. The rain was falling harder now, blurring the city lights. Without thinking, he slipped off his jacket and draped it over her shoulders. The warmth stunned her. "I can't. I shouldn't." He interrupted softly. "You look like you need it more than I do." And then, as if realizing how strange the moment must seem, he added with a small, almost awkward smile, "I'm Nathan Hale." Lila hesitated before replying, her voice barely audible. "Lila." Nathan glanced at the cafe behind her. "Do you work here?" She nodded. "Closing shift." He looked thoughtfully for a moment, then gestured to the car. "Let me drive you home. It's not safe to walk alone this late." She froze. Every warning she'd ever learned screamed in her head. Never trust anyone, especially someone who looks like they could buy the whole block. But there was something different in his tone, a quiet sincerity she hadn't heard in years. Still, she shook her head. No, thank you, but I'll be fine. Nathan didn't press. He reached into his pocket, pulled out a sleek card, and held it toward her. If you ever change your mind, if you ever need help, call this number, anytime. She didn't take it at first. The card looked absurdly out of place in her world of thrift store clothes and dollar coffee. But when she finally reached out, his fingers brushed hers. Warm, steady, real. Good night, Lila, he said, before getting back into the car. The engine hummed, the lights disappeared into the rain, and she was left standing alone, his jacket wrapped around her, the faint scent of cedar and rain lingering in the fabric. For the first time in years, the night didn't feel entirely empty. She didn't know it yet, but that small act of kindness, a stranger's concern, a jacket in the rain, would become the first thread in a tapestry she never imagined for herself. A story that would take her from the shadows of yesterday to a place she never believed existed. Love. The next morning, the city woke beneath a washed-out sky, its streets slick with silver light. Lila rose early for another long shift, Nathan Hale's jacket still hanging over the back of her chair. She had folded it neatly, intending to return it somehow, but she hadn't the courage to call the number on the card tucked in her pocket. Men like him didn't notice girls like her twice. Still, she couldn't bring herself to throw it away. The weight of that small kindness lingered in her thoughts, a quiet warmth she didn't quite know what to do with. The following week passed as usual. Work, bills, silence. She moved like a ghost through the city, polite smiles and quick steps, never drawing attention. Yet, sometimes at night, she caught herself replaying that moment in the rain. The concern in his voice, the steadiness in his eyes, the way he didn't demand anything in return. One gray afternoon, while wiping tables in the cafe, a voice startled her. "Excuse me," the man said, holding up his phone. "Do you happen to know where I can find the manager? I think I've misplaced my wallet here yesterday." Lila turned and froze. Nathan Hale stood there, in a crisp gray suit, looking effortlessly composed, a contrast to the simple warmth he'd shown that night in the rain. But his expression softened the moment their eyes met. "You," he said quietly, recognition flickering across his face. "You're Lila." She nodded, stunned. "And you're the man from the car?" He smiled, the kind that wasn't practiced for cameras or meetings. Her heart stuttered. Of all the cafes in the city, why this one? Why today? "I wanted to thank you again for your jacket," she said quickly, fumbling for words. "I washed it. I was going to find a way to return it somehow." "You kept it?" he asked, clearly pleased. "I didn't want to be rude." Nathan's smile deepened, but there was something gentler in his tone when he replied. "Rude would have been ignoring it. I'm glad it helped." She nodded, uncertain what else to say. The manager appeared then, and Nathan stepped aside, businesslike. As he spoke, the other employees whispered. The name Nathan Hale carried weight. The billionaire investor, the youngest CEO of Hale Industries, a man whose decisions could sway entire markets. Lila tried to keep her head down, but when Nathan left, he paused at the counter. "Lila, are you free after your shift?" Her eyes widened. "Why?" "I owe you coffee," he said with a faint grin. "And maybe an apology for scaring you half to death the other night." She hesitated. The cautious part of her whispered to say no. But something in his tone, not commanding, not expectant, made her pause. It wasn't pity she saw on his face. It was curiosity, kindness. "I finish at 6, she said softly. "Then I'll wait." When the clock struck 6, she emerged from the cafe with trembling hands and a heart that felt far too loud. Nathan stood by his car, no entourage, no driver, just him. They walked instead of driving, his coat slung casually over one arm, her steps tentative beside him. "You don't talk much," he said after a while, not unkindly. She gave a small, self-conscious smile. "I was never very good at talking." "That's all right," he replied. "Most people talk too much anyway." They stopped at a quiet bakery tucked into a corner street, the aroma of coffee and sugar filling the air. Inside, everything was soft light and warmth. Nathan ordered tea for her after she admitted she didn't like coffee much. "I take it you're not from around here?" he asked. "Grew up in the city," she said, staring into her cup. "But it doesn't really feel like home." He studied her for a moment but didn't press. "What do you want to do, Lila? If you could do anything." The question caught her off guard. No one had ever asked her that. Dreams had always felt like a luxury she couldn't afford. "I don't know," she admitted. "I used to like drawing. I stopped." "Why?" She hesitated, then shrugged. Life got in the way. Nathan leaned back, considering her words. Life does that, but it doesn't mean you stop living it. Their eyes met, and something unspoken passed between them, a quiet recognition of loss, of things left behind. When they stepped outside again, the sun had begun to set, turning the city gold. She realized she was smiling, genuinely, for the first time in a long time. Nathan glanced at her, noticing. "That suits you," he said. "What does?" Smiling. Her cheeks flushed. "I don't do it much." "Then you should. You have a beautiful one." Lila looked away, unsure how to respond. Compliments made her uneasy. They never came with conditions. But his tone was different, simple, honest, like he meant every word. Over the next few weeks, their paths continued to cross. Sometimes by coincidence, sometimes by quiet intention. Nathan began stopping by the cafe more often, always ordering tea instead of coffee, always choosing her line even when it was the longest. He never overstepped, never asked for more than she could give. Instead, he listened about her shifts, the people she met, the tiny victories of her day. And, little by little, the walls she had spent years building began to soften. One evening, after closing, she found a small package left at the counter. Inside was a sketchbook and a note. "For when you remember what you love, N." She stared at it for a long time, tears stinging her eyes. No one had ever given her something just because. That night, for the first time in years, she drew. Not the rain, not the pain, not the past, but the city lights, the warmth of a coffee cup, the curve of a smile she couldn't forget. Lila didn't know where any of this was heading. She only knew that when Nathan Hale looked at her, she didn't feel like the broken girl from the orphanage anymore. She felt seen, not for what she lacked, but for what she still carried inside her: quiet strength, fragile hope, and the courage to begin again. And though neither of them said it yet, the first sparks of something undeniable had begun to take shape between them, fragile, uncertain, but real. The city glimmered in winter light, cold, bright, and unforgiving. But for the first time in years, Lila didn't feel entirely invisible within it. Weeks had passed since Nathan gave her the sketchbook, and in that time, something fragile but steady had taken root between them. He still stopped by the cafe most mornings, his visits never announced, never forced. Sometimes he'd only stay a few minutes, sipping tea while reading emails. Other times, they'd talk for hours about everything and nothing: art, the city, the kind of music that made silence softer. Lila wasn't sure what they were: friends, something more. All she knew was that when he was around, the world didn't feel as sharp. Still, she kept her distance. She had learned long ago that closeness came with risk. One evening, as she wiped down the counter, Nathan approached her, a hesitant smile playing on his lips. "I have a favor to ask," he said. Lila glanced up. "What kind of favor?" "I'm hosting a charity gala this Friday," he began carefully, "for underprivileged youth programs. It's formal, but I could use someone's help behind the scenes. You're organized, and I trust you." The word trust hit her in a way she didn't expect. She hesitated. "I've never been to something like that." "You won't have to attend," he reassured quickly. "Just help me make sure things run smoothly." After a long pause, she nodded. "Okay." The night of the gala, Lila stood in the grand ballroom of the Clarendon Hotel, staring in quiet awe. The chandeliers sparkled like constellations, and the guests looked as if they'd stepped out of a magazine. She felt completely out of place in her simple black dress, one she had borrowed from a coworker, but Nathan's reassuring smile from across the room grounded her. He had told her earlier, "You belong anywhere you choose to stand." She hadn't believed it then, but those words lingered now, soft as a promise. As the evening unfolded, she kept mostly to the background, checking details, greeting vendors, ensuring everything ran smoothly. Yet, every time she looked up, Nathan seemed to be watching her, subtly, but always with that same warmth. At one point, a business associate approached her, mistaking her for one of the staff. "Could you get me another drink?" he said, dismissively waving a glass. Before she could respond, Nathan appeared beside her, calm but firm. "Actually, she's working with me," he said evenly, "and I can get my own drink." The man stammered, muttered an apology, and disappeared into the crowd. Lila stood frozen, heart pounding. "You didn't have to do that." He replied softly, "People shouldn't talk to you like that." Something unspoken passed between them, a current of understanding, of care. For the rest of the night, her nervousness faded. After the gala ended, Lila stayed behind to help clean up. The ballroom was nearly empty, the music fading to a gentle hum. Nathan rolled up his sleeves and began stacking chairs beside her. "You don't have to help," she said, half laughing. "Neither do you," he countered with a smile. They worked in companionable silence for a while, the quiet broken only by the sound of clinking glass and the soft rustle of fabric. When they finally paused, Nathan leaned against a table, watching her. "You know," he said, "you handled tonight perfectly. You have a talent for this." "For what? Picking up glasses?" "For managing chaos," he said. "You kept everyone calm without saying much. That's a rare skill." She laughed softly, shaking her head. "You make it sound impressive." "It is," he said simply. The sincerity in his tone made her throat tighten. No one had ever noticed her like that, not for what she could do, but for who she was. Then he said quietly, "You've changed, Lila." She looked up. "Have I?" "You smile more now," he said. "You look lighter." She swallowed hard, her voice barely above a whisper. "That's because of you." He took a slow step closer, his eyes gentle. "Then I'll try not to ruin it." The air between them shifted, not electric, but tender. She could feel the steady thrum of her heartbeat, the warmth in his gaze, and something fragile blooming between them that scared her as much as it soothed her. But Nathan didn't close the distance. He only said, "Come on, I'll drive you home." The car ride was quiet, the city lights painting gold and silver across the windshield. When they stopped outside her apartment, Lila hesitated, turning toward him. "Nathan, why are you being so kind to me?" He met her eyes, because kindness shouldn't need a reason. She wanted to believe him, she really did, but a lifetime of disappointment whispered otherwise. "People don't just do things like this," she said softly. "Then maybe they should," he replied. Her throat ached. "I don't know how to trust people like that." Nathan smiled sadly. "Then start small. You don't have to trust me completely. Just let me be here." Something inside her cracked open, a tiny fissure of hope breaking through years of fear. She nodded, just once. "Good night, Lila," he said, his voice quiet, sincere. "Good night," I whispered back. As he drove away, she watched the taillights fade into the dark. For the first time, she didn't feel left behind. She felt seen. That night, Lila sat by her window, sketchbook on her lap, pencil moving in gentle lines. When she was done, she looked at the drawing. The outline of two figures beneath the streetlight, one offering a coat, the other standing in the rain. Maybe trust wasn't about forgetting the past. Maybe it was about believing, even for a moment, that someone could see the bruises beneath your heart and still call them beautiful. And Nathan Hale was teaching her exactly that. The city was waking to spring. Morning light slipped through the blinds of Lila's small apartment, glinting off the half-open sketchbook on her table. The drawings had changed over the past few months. Fewer storms, more color, more life. She had changed too. Since the gala, Nathan had remained in her world like quiet sunlight. He never tried to rush her, never demanded more than she could give. They shared coffees before dawn, long walks through crowded streets, phone calls that stretched past midnight. The air between them was filled with unspoken understanding, a tenderness that asked for nothing and offered everything. Lila had found steady work as an assistant at Hale Industries. Nathan had insisted she earned the position on her own merits, and she had. The first weeks were daunting, glittering hallways, tailored suits, polished confidence. But Nathan treated her no differently there than he did anywhere else. He trusted her judgment, invited her ideas, and defended her when others questioned her place. Sometimes she caught herself watching him across the conference table, composed, brilliant, carrying the kind of calm that steadied a room. And sometimes, when their eyes met, he'd smile that small, knowing smile that reminded her of rain and beginnings. One Friday evening, the office was nearly empty. The city outside was drenched in pink twilight. Nathan stood by the window of his corner office, jacket off, sleeves rolled up, staring out at the skyline. Lila knocked softly. "You wanted these reports before the weekend." He turned, his expression easing. "You're still here?" "I thought I'd finish them before heading home." He took the folder from her hands, but his gaze lingered. "You've been working nonstop. You should rest." "I could say the same to you," she said with a shy smile. He laughed quietly. Fair point. The air felt different tonight, quiet, suspended. Nathan walked to his desk, set the reports down, then looked back at her. "Do you ever think about how strange it is?" he asked softly. "What is?" "How two people from completely different worlds can end up in the same place, at the same moment." Lila's heart stilled. "Sometimes." "I used to believe life was a series of calculated decisions," he said, stepping closer. "Now I think some moments are simply meant to happen." She met his gaze. "Like rain and headlights?" His smile deepened, exactly like that. Silence stretched between them, full and gentle. Then, quietly, he reached out and brushed a strand of hair from her face. She didn't flinch this time. The warmth of his touch was steady, patient, an unspoken question rather than a demand. "Lila," he murmured, "you don't have to answer anything right now, but I need you to know what I feel for you isn't pity. It's admiration, respect, and something I don't want to ignore anymore." Her eyes burned, but not from pain. "I'm still learning how to be okay, Nathan." "Then let me walk with you while you learn," he said simply. Something inside her gave way, an old, heavy lock clicking open. She stepped closer until the space between them disappeared and let herself rest her forehead against his shoulder. For a long moment, neither of them spoke. And that was the beginning of everything. The months that followed felt like waking from a long sleep. Lila's art began selling at local galleries, small pieces at first, then larger commissions. Nathan refused to take credit, though he quietly bought one of her early sketches and hung it in his office, 2 figures beneath a streetlight sharing a coat. He still worked too much, still carried the weight of his company on his shoulders, but when he came home, because now he often came home to her, the sharp edges of his world seemed to soften. They built routines that didn't need grand gestures, cooking together, late-night walks, and laughing over burnt toast. For Lila, love wasn't fireworks. It was safety. It was being able to breathe without fear. One evening, nearly a year after their first meeting, Nathan invited her to a quiet dinner on the rooftop of his building. The city stretched out below them, glittering like a sea of stars. A small table waited beneath strings of lights, the air carrying the scent of jasmine. She looked around in awe. "You did all this?" He shrugged, pretending casual. "I had help, but the reason's mine." Before she could reply, he knelt. Lila's breath caught. Nathan took a small box from his pocket and opened it. Inside, a ring, simple and bright, a circle of light that seemed to echo the city below. "Lila Carter," he said, voice steady but soft. "You once told me you didn't know what home felt like. For me, it's wherever you are. Will you marry me?" Tears spilled before she could stop them. The girl who had once hidden from the world, who had believed she was unworthy of love, could only nod. "Yes," she whispered, her voice trembling. 1,000 times yes. Nathan stood, slipping the ring onto her finger, and the world seemed to quiet around them. The city lights blurred into gold, and for the first time, Lila felt the weight of the past lift completely. The wedding was small, friends, a few colleagues, the city skyline as their witness. Lila wore a simple ivory dress and carried wildflowers instead of roses. Nathan couldn't stop smiling, neither could she. When the vows were spoken, there were no grand promises, only truths. That they would be kind, that they would listen, that they would never let fear speak louder than love. And when they kissed, the applause and laughter around them melted into one clear, undeniable feeling: peace. Later that night, as they stood on the balcony of their apartment, Lila leaned against him, watching the stars. "Do you ever think about that night?" she asked, smiling. "The rain," he said, smiling. "Every day." She laughed softly. "If you hadn't stopped, everything might have been different." "I think," Nathan murmured, wrapping an arm around her, "the universe was always going to find a way to bring you light." She looked up at him, eyes shimmering. "You did." He kissed her forehead, and for the first time, she believed it. The rain that once sang of sorrow had become a song of love, steady, soft, endless. And in its rhythm, Lila Carter finally found him. I hope you found this story interesting. Don't forget to subscribe, like, share, and also hit the notification bell for more interesting stories like this. Thanks for watching.